Hi everyone, I'm Clarice, one of the organizers of NextHack 2022. Welcome to the first of a trio of panel sessions with topics relating to our hackathon challenge teams. Today we are discussing tech for sustainability, energy savings, and decarbonization. We have invited Hui to open the session for us today. Hui Lau is the managing partner, corporate development and partnerships in NCS. In addition to his day job, Hui also serves on several advisory committees and boards, including the Governing Council of the Singapore Institute of Directors and Board of Science Centre Singapore. Prior to joining NCS, he was the Assistant Chief Executive at IMDA, Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Consumer Business at StarHub, and Vice President of Corporate Development at Lenovo. Let's welcome Hui.
Well, thanks so much, Clarice. I think first of all, a big thank you to everyone for joining today's webinar and being part of this NextHack, because as you saw from the video clip, the NextHack is an annual platform that NCS puts together, because this is about bringing communities together, bringing teams together, so that we are able to catalyze new ideas, we are able to drive new innovations that really makes a difference. So last year we had good participation, a lot of new ideas and solutions coming up, and we're excited about what's possible this year. This particular webinar, we're very excited to have a very wonderful set of panelists later to share their thoughts on this topic, because I think all of us have been reading a lot of news and a lot of updates in this whole space of sustainability on energy, whether it is the Nord Stream disruptions or new regulations or new standards or new expectations. I think it's safe to say that we all recognize that this whole space has moved from a nice thing to do to the right thing to do, and increasingly to a thing that we must all do. I don't know what's the right grammar behind it, but it's no longer a nice thing to do. It's no longer a right thing to do. It's become something absolute necessary. And if you don't get anything out of this whole session, we do hope that everyone feels the sense of urgency that we do need to come together. And coming together, we do believe that technology has a big role to play, because technology is not just part of everything we do, but technology potentially has the ability to push the frontier in terms of what's possible. So for us at NCS, our purpose as a company is about advancing communities by partnering governments as well as enterprises, so that we are able to harness technology to make the extraordinary happen. So along that theme, we are excited on what are the possibilities that we can come together with partners on innovating on new frontiers, so that we can use technology, harness technology, to hopefully create new offerings, new solutions, new ways of thinking as we combat this together. So wanted to share that because it is not just a hackathon, it is not just an ideation platform. Don't see it as just another panel, and hopefully it is an additional spark on the thing that we need to do together. One of the things that we do leave with quite a number of the teams that we work with is that let's all be a maker and not just a taker. So hopefully at the end of this, there are things that we can make together. So with that, let me introduce Marie, who's going to be our moderator. She's the founding partner of Wavemaker Impact, and then she'll introduce everyone else. And look forward to your Q&A in these sessions, as well as your participation moving forward in the next segment. Marie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Hui. Really appreciate the intro, and completely agree on the urgency of acting on addressing climate change. So I think that's a really important message, and one that we'll probably echo throughout our panel discussion. So as Hui mentioned, my name is Marie. I'm one of the founding partners of Wavemaker Impact, along with Steve Melhuish, Doug Parker, Quinton Viquette, and Paul Santos. We decided to start Wavemaker Impact about a year ago. We're the first VC-backed climate tech venture builder in Southeast Asia. So there's a bit of a mouthful. But what we're looking to do is build a portfolio of startups that can abate 10% of the global carbon budget. And we co-found these new startups, these new climate tech unicorns, with experienced entrepreneurs. And we do that for several reasons. The first being that we genuinely believe that entrepreneurs can play a critical role in the fight against climate change. And secondly, that there aren't enough talented entrepreneurs looking at the biggest drivers of emissions in our region. So Anne and the team at NCS has very kindly put up our carbon emissions map, and that was really where we started. So when we decided that we wanted to embark on this this journey, the first question we asked is, what drives emissions in our region? And we were quite disappointed to learn that there actually aren't a lot of resources out there that can help us understand that challenge. So we put this together over a couple of months. You know, this is version 1. We still continue to refine it, and if anyone has inputs, I think we'd be very, very happy to have them. But you know, it kicked up some interesting things. So, for example, the biggest single driver of emissions in our region is land use and carbon sinks. So, deforestation is a challenge that is, you know, unique to our region. We're home to 25% of the world's investable forest carbon stock. 90% of the tropical peatlands sit in our region. 30 to 40% of blue carbon habitats are within our region as well. So what I think that shows us is, even though Southeast Asia as a whole is only about 7% of global emissions, we have the opportunity to create solutions from the region that can make a significant impact in the fight for climate change. And hopefully one of the things that we feel very keenly about is that you know, that's everyone's responsibility, from the entrepreneurs to the large corporates, which are the first customers to many of our startups, and then of course for us as individuals. So I think the final note that I'd like to leave on in terms of my introduction is what we look to build at Wavemaker Impact is what we call 100 by 100 companies. So these are companies with the ability to abate 100 megatons of carbon emissions equivalent, so greenhouse gas emissions, and be $100 million businesses at scale. And that's important for 2 reasons. The first is that you know, the fight against climate change is a real world fight. So we have to change behavior on the ground. We have to deploy new technology. And it's really important that we try to measure that direct impact as much as possible. So we've picked our North Star metric of 100 megatons of GHG. And then the other point that I really enjoy about this is that there's also a commercial element. So carbon is physical, it's embedded, it's distributed. Everybody owns small bits of carbon everywhere. And the only way that we can create large and impactful solutions is if they're scalable, and that means that they have to be commercial. So I think we're at a unique point where there's a genuine intersection between, you know, doing good for the planet and doing well for the people that live in our region, and that's hopefully an ethos that I hope you know, can be one of the takeaways from this panel discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to just introduce the panel a little bit. So, you know, as I sort of mentioned, climate change is the challenge of our generation. And in our region, 3 of the largest cities in Southeast Asia, Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh, and Jakarta, will be underwater by 2050 if we don't change. And this will cause incredible asset loss and disruption, particularly in our region, where over 120 million people depend on coastal areas for their livelihood. And as I mentioned, this is also a huge opportunity. So the green transition is estimated to be worth $2 trillion in the next decade. Over 40 billion was invested in climate tech last year, more than double the amount invested in 2020. 80% of global GDP is committed to net zero targets. And Hui Mien from Singtel has a can talk about the net zero commitment by 2050. And Lendlease has an incredible target of not only being net zero by 2035, but absolute zero by 2040. So I'm so excited to be joined by this panel today to discuss the role that technology plays in sustainability, energy savings, and decarbonization. Joined by Steve Melhuish, who is a serial entrepreneur and one of the founding partners of Wavemaker Impact, Hui Mien from Singtel, and Venky from Lendlease. So to kick us off, perhaps we can go into that order, and I'll ask each of the panelists to do a personal intro and introducing themselves, what their role, what they do on a day-to-day basis, and then, you know, on a personal level, what sparked your interest in sustainability. So Steve, shall we start with you?
Sure, thanks for that, Marie. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to be here today talking about the most important subject that we should be talking about, which is how do we address climate change. So I'm an entrepreneur. I've been building tech businesses for the last 25 years in Asia and Europe. Been in Asia for the last 18 years. And the last business I built was Propertyguru, and which we built from two people, myself and my co-founder, into 1,500 staff. We scaled across 5 markets in Southeast Asia and all the challenges associated with that. And to a point where we're now being used by about 40 million consumers every single month, helping them navigate a challenging real estate market. As a separate subject, let's talk about it another time. So for the last 4 years, we've been focused on sustainability, initially investing in green tech companies in Asia who are trying to address climate change and also social impact. And the thesis for that is climate change is obvious, but social impact, because the people who are going to be most impacted by climate change are the people at the bottom of the pyramid, day workers and marginalized people in the population. What I very quickly realized is that just doing that on my own is probably not the best way of achieving the biggest impact. And how do I scale that? And so about a year ago, as Marie said, we came together with 3 others to start Wavemaker Impact and build a fund around that and operate at a global basis. And so I'm really excited about that. So what keeps me awake day to day, I guess, is investing in and helping grow climate tech and social impact companies, predominantly in Asia, and trying to accelerate that growth and build sustainable businesses in that space. My sustainability journey started really in 2018 on the back of hiring a CEO and started the transition process with Propertyguru and started to think about what next. And so 2018, the climate drum was beating extremely loudly, and everywhere I looked, I seemed to be confronted by what was going on from a climate point of view. And it was a year of many records that were broken in terms of record temperatures, record wildfires in the US and Australia, record floods in Japan, typhoon damage in Philippines and Hong Kong, etc. Those records since then have been broken, and what we're seeing right before our eyes is the impacts of climate change accelerate. So putting that in the context of what that means for my kids, I got shit scared about what the future is going to look like for them. All the things I've been taking for granted as a kid, and today, walking through forests and seeing nature, seeing snow, swimming in oceans not filled with plastic, that's stuff that I take for granted, maybe won't be there in the future for my kids. And that scared me. And so I thought, how do I play a role in this? And so at that point, I decided that I would spend my professional time, energy, and money trying to do what I can to try and fix the problem. And so I think, 10 plus years ago, when I was looking about what business do I build, Propertyguru seemed so obvious to me, but no one else was doing it. And that's what concerned me, but I just got on with it. 10 years later, the most obvious problem to fix seems to be climate change. And thankfully, we're making some progress on that. So yeah, very happy to be here and look forward to the session later on.
Thanks, Steve. Hui Mien, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hey, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I think thanks for having me here. So I'm Hui Mien here, and I look after environmental sustainability in the Singtel group. So essentially, what we try to achieve, it's really how do we then integrate environmental sustainability as part of our growth strategy, right? As Singtel continue to look at how do we want to grow our business in the next few years. Since myself, I have been probably one of the few rare sustainable professionals around that has a career that started from sustainability. My interest really started way back in when I was still in school. So it was really something that when you're in school, you do it as a project, right? But I think what I realized in getting into sustainability is really when you're in sustainability, the more you know about it, the more to Steve's point, right, you really get scared out of the shit. Like if you think about really the whole development and trajectory of where we are looking at, Also having grown up in the affluence, in the era of affluence, right? I think again, we knew that if that continues, the world is actually not sustainable. So as a nature lover myself, I think when I was looking for being trained in electrical and electronic engineer, and when I was looking for a job upon graduation, I tell myself like, what can I do that it's not just earning a keep for myself, right? But how would I want to make sure that I spend my time in a job that I really feel is purposeful and it does contribute to a greater purposes beyond just earning money for the company? I think that really sets my beginning in terms of why I decided that sustainability, it's where I should be doing. It's fortunate enough that I've got a opportunity to actually pursue a PhD in sustainable product development. So my background really started from looking at circular economy, and then subsequently I've spent a few years in ASTA looking at really promoting sustainable manufacturing before moving on to IKEA, where I head up sustainability for Southeast Asia. After which, I then also had the opportunity to look at, to develop the Mandai Rejuvenation Project, an iconic ecotourism project. I think, again, it's really something that if we looked at Singapore, given our really small constraint, what can we do to help Singaporeans to be able to understand and appreciate nature, as well as, the greater scheme of sustainability before joining Singtel. And I think here in Singtel, I'm very excited and actually motivated by what we are in for. So Singtel is committed to a net zero since 2019. And right now, really, we're in the thick and thin of really mapping out in detail. You often talk about people making commitment. I think commitment is the first stage. The second thing is really the how, right? Mapping out the how. So we're really at this stage of really mapping out the how and what do we actually need to do to incorporate and work with the various business units so that sustainability, to Howie's point, is an integral part of our business strategy and not a standalone or not a feel good or not a good to have. Yeah. So I think I'll stop there. Thanks for having me here. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thanks for that great intro. So Venky, last but not least, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Venky here from Lendlease. I'm heading the technical management for Asia business here within Lendlease. Technical management is very wide, but I'm playing two roles within the business now. My key role is to lead, guide the team and support the team from bid conversion to design, procurement, delivery, and commissioning of the building services across Asia for all the integrated projects. But what keeps me motivated and inspired is our opportunity to lead the smart building technologies, sustainability solutions, innovation, and as a service business model across the Asia business portfolio. My interest started with smart building technologies and the smart city solutions about 7 or 8 years ago, because that's where we felt like the world is changing and the technology is going to play an important role. But in the last 5 years, we can see maybe last 4 or 5 years, we have seen that sustainability has become the most important part. Then I felt like, okay, if we can integrate smart and sustainability that's a big opportunity for the business, and that's a big opportunity for the country and the globe as well. So that's why I developed my interest around this sustainability and smart building. And finally, having won the SGBC BCA Sustainability Professional Leadership Award personally for the year 2022, you don't need any other motivation to be interested in sustainability. Thank you. That's all from me.
Congratulations again on your award. That's fantastic to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the panelists actually for sharing a little bit about their personal journey. I often think that the personal reasons that people end up dedicating so much of their professional time to sustainability is often as interesting as what we do, because it does require tremendous amount of motivation and sometimes a little bit of fight to get this to happen. So just to kick off the panel, I'd like to ask both Venky and Hui Mien to share a little bit about their company's decarbonization goals. And maybe Venky, we can start with you, because as I mentioned in the intro, Lendlease has incredibly ambitious decarbonization goals. So would love to hear more about how you think about that. Not many corporates are talking about absolute zero, so that's quite an interesting concept. And I would love as well for you to give us a few examples of any upcoming projects on your pathways that you're considering to achieve these goals.
Absolutely, it's my honor. So yes, you are absolutely right. The Lendlease sustainability targets are some of the most ambitious for the real estate sector, not in Asia, but globally. We are a 1.5-degree aligned company underpinned by 2 key carbon targets. Net zero carbon for scope 1 and 2, we have to achieve it by 2025. And the absolute zero carbon, I think that's a big task, right, by 2040. And that includes scope 3. For those who are not sure what it is, scope 1, 2, and 3, right? Scope 1 is about the fuels we burn, and scope 2 is about the power we consume, and scope 3 is about the materials we use. So when you're talking about scope 3, it goes beyond what is under your control. So we have to work with our partners and the manufacturers and everything else, which we are doing. We are a part of the Responsible Steel group, and we are doing several things in the industry as well. So moving on, in regards to the scope 1, what do we do in Lendlease, right, to be future ready? The initiatives that we are implementing across our projects is to phase out the diesel and gas in the construction and operations by focusing on energy storage, electrifications, biofuel, and we're also doing the on-site renewable and many others. And we have already found a way to find the right balance between using those technologies and eliminating the diesel on staged basis. But the gas is a big task for all the new buildings that we are building on. For the office, we are not providing any gas. But when it comes to the F&B, it is still a concern. We have to find a mutual pathway, and we are working with the industry to achieve the better pathway along those lines. The next is on terms of scope 2, and our approach is to achieve the net zero always through on-site solutions as much as possible over the off-site offsets. So for instance, for PLQ, Mary asked me about some of the examples, right? Maybe I can quote a few examples here. For instance, our PLQ project is Green Park Platinum certified. It was designed to 32% energy efficiency in the year 2015 and operating close to that, or maybe slightly higher than that 32% for the past 4 years. With the technology and solutions available at that point in time, it was considered as a great outcome for the development. But when we started maybe a couple of other office towers, maybe an integrated buildings in the year 2019 and 2020, we thought we should do better. We moved away from platinum and we started targeting green mark super low energy building. When no one was even thinking about super low energy building certification in 2019, we thought we should do that and we should lead. And in fact, we have already achieved that super low energy building design features and energy savings of over 41% for those 2 buildings in design, and the construction is ongoing. And finally, I'm proud to say, like Hui Mien is here, and for the upcoming Singtel project, and we have set ourselves a target of 50% energy efficiency. And we have been questioned, can you achieve that 50% energy efficiency? I think if we can see, like from 2015 to 2020, we can move from 32 to 40 or 41 or 42%. But we believe like by the time we construct this 50%, we definitely can achieve, right? So that's where we believe technology will play a huge role. And not only that, we want to achieve a zero energy building certification for the job. So I hope Hui Mien will be happy with it as well. And so maybe the pathways, right? Some of the pathways for what we do, right? And what we can do there to achieve the decarbonization goals, right? And of course, as I said, it's a scope 1, 2, and 3. For what is more relevant for this group is about what are we going to do in terms of scope 1 and 2. So we are always looking at the active and passive solutions. At the same time, we are looking at various on-site renewables. Going beyond the traditional rooftop, we are looking at the facade BIPV. Can we do a carbon capture? And can we do the hydrogen fuel cells? We know the technology is not there, the infra is not there, but we believe we can achieve it very soon. And of course, we're also looking at other solutions. The smart building solution, the smart IoT sensor is a big talk, and we don't want to make it as a talking point. We want to implement it in our projects, and we are implementing it in our projects now. And of course, DFMA and the prefabrication, which also helps in sustainability and safety as well. And again, when it comes to the scope 3, that's the big task that we have on hand. And we don't have the entire pathway to achieve the 2040, but we are very sure we will achieve it by 2040 by maximizing the green products use, responsible steel, and we are looking at the facades, and we are talking about recycling things and many others. I can speak about it for hours. Maybe I stop here and hand it back to you, Mary.
Fantastic. And I've got a couple more follow-up questions for you throughout the panel, so we'll give you more chance to share some more examples. So turning now to Hui Mien, Singtel has been one of the leaders, especially locally, setting the tone for the types of decarbonization strategies and net zero strategies that Singaporean companies can take on. So can you share a little bit about Singtel's net zero strategy and the type of projects that you've got coming up?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Mari. I think so. Just to recap a little bit about Singtel, I think since 2017 we were the first company in Asia, excluding Japan, to have a SBTi target. Validated. At that time, there wasn't the net zero standard. There wasn't a lot of guidance as compared to today, right? So we pledged to reduce 42% of our scope 1 and scope 2 by 2030, with an interim target of 25% by 2025. And then later on in 2019, we've decided that we will be one of the first few companies to commit to a net zero by 2050 latest. So I would say that that has sort of helped to put things in perspective. And right now, 5 years on from our target, we are required to sort of refresh and relook at our target as per SBTi. And one of the things that we're really doing right now, it's looking through based on business growth. As you probably know, that Singtel also have gone through quite a fair bit of restructuring in the last 2 years. So that's really something that we're trying to look at to see, could we actually do even better? Can we do faster? So that's one thing that we're still trying to pin down, and then once it's ready, we'll be ready to announce. But having said that, it doesn't mean that we are just waiting for the net zero strategy to be born. Already from since 2017, we've been working hard on it. So first, we've actually also developed the decarbonization hierarchy within the organization to guide the organization in terms of what do we do. It's easy to say that we want to be carbon neutral and then we just do offsets, right? But I think that's not what we want. So we've developed a decarbonization hierarchy. I think that's where we, number one, work with really partners like Lendlease to see that in terms of our scope 1, where could we really reduce the use of all the fuels that's associated. I mean, we've started electrifying our fleets. So some of the fleets you see on the road that carries the Singtel and the NCS logo, they are electrified, and we're in the process of converting them eventually to 100%. It's a process, right? About the COE and etc. So we're on our way. It takes a while because of the entire number of fleet, and as well as technology availability. I think one of the challenges that we face, it's some of the when we do need bigger capacity trucks, we don't yet have the kind of suitable alternative in terms of replacing it, but that's really something that we set ourselves to do. Secondly, I think of course when we look at buildings, having partners like Lendlease in terms of really working together, and as well as our other partners to see from a build perspective, how can we build better? I think that's the first step to reduce the need for anything in scope 1. And then as we move towards having that, it's really the efficiency. We've always been having energy efficiency initiative and projects over the years, replacing chiller. Singtel as an organization, we do have a legacy equipment in the sense that a lot of the exchanges that they have built over the years. So there's a huge effort in terms of really switching out all the old chillers into the more energy efficient one. Again, it's a process that we need to go through given the huge number of equipment that we have. So that's really something that we really embarked on already in the last 5 years. So moving forward, we will build better. As we move out the old one, we definitely will build better, and we've actually made that as one of our guiding principle and policy for us as we continue in our new development. So I think again, once we do that, it's of course seeking renewable energy. I think maximizing areas for solar panel, it goes without us saying in these days. But we're also looking at where all the various, being able to support renewable energy project, whether local or overseas. And obviously, I think with the energy import project going on right now, we are also actively engaging in that process. One of the things we've done last year is also we've actually completely mapped out our scope 3. our entire value chain emission. So I think that was the first time we have a full picture of 15 categories. So now we have a view. And as part of the net zero roadmap, other than scope 1, scope 2, is really how are we going to commit to scope 3 working together with a supplier in terms of really looking through what are some of the technology, what are the goods and services that when we looked at it, how can we bring our emission even down further? For example, our network equipment supplier. Are we able then to say that, to tell our customer that, you know, the connectivity that Singtel brings you comes with a lower footprint, and then eventually a net zero services that we are delivering, right? So those are the areas that we are spending a lot of time to really map out and figure out the way. I think one of the challenge that we definitely see is we have obviously a huge number of suppliers. The big boys, they will do it, right? I think the challenge we have is really the mid-size and the more local ones, where we need to bring them along the journey. And it's again a process that we are going through right now. So some of the challenges that I face in terms of it is really finding alternative, right? And also, I think in a sector that's highly regulated, like where we operate in, there's also the regulatory challenge. Often, I think regulatory challenge doesn't quite match up to how the company wants to move, right? Because from a regulatory standpoint, they will always take the most conservative approach. So that is one area where we really need to sort of put in effort to see where are the pockets where we really can have opportunity to see reduction. I probably want to stop here and save some of the points for follow-up question later.
You covered quite a lot.
Yes.
And actually, I am so glad you brought up Singtel's very data-based approach, right, to understanding your climate footprint, because I think that's a very important element of this. And I was also very impressed with the fact that Singtel has actually set an internal carbon price. So that's something that I'd like to follow up on in subsequent questions. But maybe just to take the other side of this equation now, having heard from the corporate side of decarbonization, Steve, what would you say the role that entrepreneurs and startups play in helping companies achieve these decarbonization targets? And can you give us a few examples from your portfolio of how startups are doing that now?
Well, first of all, Marie, you make it sound very adversarial, right? It's the other side of the coin. It's the startups versus the corporates.
We're all in together.
So I guess from my point of view, I guess, if we're, well, first of all, I also want to say, congratulations to Lendlease and Singtel, because, one of the things I spend a lot of time talking to people about is there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of greenwashing going on. There aren't that many companies in Asia that are actually walking the talk and actually doing things and taking action. So, I applaud Singtel and Lendlease on that. Obviously, do more and do it faster, but actually, you're leading the pack, so that's great. And by the way, Propertyguru is a very happy tenant in PLQ, as I'm sure you know, Venky. So, addressing climate change is it's an absolute mammoth task, right? And it's going to require governments, investors, consumers, corporates, but also entrepreneurs. And the current trajectory, we're lucky if we're going to hit the -2 degrees. It's probably +2 degrees, probably going to be more than that at this rate. And so if you think about what entrepreneurs do well, I think they can play a critical role, and startups can play a critical role in addressing climate change, because great entrepreneurs are good at solving really, really big problems and creating really big opportunities and businesses from solving these big problems. And I think they can do that with urgency as well. And I think that's exactly what is required to complement all the efforts that governments and also investors and corporates are doing. And so if you think about, I guess what you alluded to earlier on, Marie, which is, we have 10 years to reduce emissions by 50%. We're not on track for that. But that basically means that we can't wait for rocket science and new technology to come along, because, with the best will in the world, new technology like carbon capture at scale, like cell-based food at scale, like hydrogen at scale, is probably 20 to 30 years away. And for sure it's going to be required, and for sure we need to start building the infrastructure for that. But we can't wait. And so thankfully, at least, the technology exists already to reduce 50% of emissions globally. You know, if you think about, you know, telecom towers and base stations today are powered by diesel generators. Doesn't need to be powered by diesel generators. They can be powered by renewable energy. You know, why is there not solar on every single rooftop in Southeast Asia? It's not a technology problem. It's a business model and incentives problem. So I think there's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs in the region focused on climate tech, adapting existing technology and rapidly rolling it out and thinking about adoption, because great entrepreneurs in the region who've maybe created 1, 2, or 3 businesses have done that particularly in a sort of digitized or tech-driven way. And it's around fast adoption. So how do you get, you know, 1 factory to 100 factories to 1,000 factories to adopt a relatively simple technology, which will then have a reduction in emissions? And so by focusing on the things that are important to customers, in the case of Singtel or Lendlease, for example, it's going to be around revenue, it's going to be around price, it's going to be around getting customers, it's going to be around productivity, margins, and reducing costs. By using existing technology to address those business challenges, those real business challenges, and through that, reducing emissions, we can have a really big impact at reducing the overall emissions by 50% in the next 10 years. And I think that's where the focus needs to be, and that's the focus where the majority of the companies that I'm working with and we're building, I guess, Marie, are doing exactly that. And so if I think about out of the 22 companies I've invested in and helping, majority of them are focused on B2B. They're helping corporates to decarbonize. They have a business model which is focused around top and bottom line, and results in meaningful emissions. And it's very hard to choose your favorite 3 kids, but I'll choose 3 examples. So one of those is a company called Amped Energy, which is decarbonizing the construction industry. And as we know, the construction industry, built environments, probably about, including energy, is probably about 35% of emissions, but even just the construction energy for construction is around about 10%. So by replacing the diesel generator that's powering the cranes and the hoists and the power drills on site with essentially a lithium-ion battery, existing technology adapted to a construction site, Amped has created a thing called Entertainer. And what Entertainer does is powers all of the kit on a construction site, electrifies the construction site essentially. So not only does it reduce costs by 15%, it also reduces CO2 emissions by 85%. It also removes all of the air pollution issues that you have with diesel generators. So you've got urban environment with construction workers working around a diesel generator, inhaling these fumes. It's horrible for the health. You remove all those problems, and you also remove any noise. And so you can then get extended working. So you've got business benefits from cost to health, to productivity, and CO2 emissions, just with that one example. Another example is a company called Sepur. And what Sepur does is it addresses the heat and energy required for chemical separation, used for example, vegetable oil companies, food processing companies, semiconductor companies, pharma companies. So their clients are people like Cargill and Exxon, Fuji Oil, etc. And by taking a membrane and adapting the membrane, you can replace all of the heat that's an energy required to produce the heat. And so today, about $4 trillion is spent on energy just in the industrial chemical separation industry. And it produces something like 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions today. So removing that, replacing with membranes, reduces CO2 by 90% and improves operating costs by 50%. So significant cost and also decarbonization opportunities there. And lastly, the F&B space. And if you think about SMEs, to Hui Mien's point before, SMEs play a very vital role in the economy in Southeast Asia. The F&Bs, there's about 2 million F&Bs companies in Southeast Asia, and they together consume about $78 billion of energy, which is today, unfortunately, in Southeast Asia, is like 95+% fossil fuel energy. So they've created an intelligent energy manager, which is essentially energy efficiency, using an IoT sensor and some algorithms, which then smartly sense and manage the power consumption for F&B outlets. And you think about an F&B outlet, they're significantly margin constrained. They've got inflation challenges around food. They've got inflation challenges around energy. They've got inflation challenges around manpower costs. So by taking away 30% of the energy cost for an F&B outlet, it increases their bottom line by about 15%. So this company started about 18 months ago. It now has 600 outlets, including Caltex in Singapore, KFC and Pizza Hut, etc. So these companies are addressing two things. One, decarbonisation, but that's the result of actually addressing a business problem in energy. So energy costs, for example, or productivity. So business benefit and decarbonisation.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I think what I really like about all three of those examples is that it shows that you don't, perhaps with the exception of Superior, you don't have to be a scientist, right? It's not heavy R&D. You don't have to even be an expert in the space, right? A lot of the founders that are in climate tech, have not spent their whole career in climate tech and don't have, doctorates and so on in the space.
Right. Exactly right.
So I think that's quite inspiring. So I'm just conscious we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to collapse a couple of the questions that we've got.
That was fast.
Yeah, the time went by quickly. But what I really want to ask both Venky and Hui Mien, from slightly different angles, is the role that you see technology playing in reaching your sustainability, energy savings, and decarbonization goals. And in particular, maybe Venky, I'll start with you. I'd love to hear some examples of things that have worked well, and maybe also some examples of things that you thought would work, you were so sure were going to work, and then ended up not working, and why. Because I think sometimes those examples are just as interesting as the successes.
Okay, that's good, right? But anyway, that's a great question, right? So that's the topic, right? That's a topic of today also, right? And but one thing which I want to start with, right? There are studies out there in the market highlighting 20 to 30% of the building energy is wasted by purely not controlling. So I think that's where the huge opportunity is for technologies. So in order for us to effectively control and save the wasted energy, we need data. And when we have the data, we need the skills to analyze the data and then identify and implement the solutions. But many organizations now, they do have data with the BMS and the IBMS, but it is the human skills to analyze those data and implement effective solutions is lacking. So that is where technology can play a huge role by plugging in the gap and even do things that the skilled personnel can't even imagine of, right? So that's a big opportunity for the technology. Then maybe you ask two set of questions, right? What has worked and what hasn't worked, right? But maybe I'll look at it in a different perspective, right? So it's like what we should do more to achieve a better outcome by using the technology, right? So though the building have got reasonable data, for the technology to deliver the next generation deep learning analytics outcome, right, we need to have more sensing. We need to like smart IoT sensors to be installed more than what we have now. And also we need to measure more by using the smart sensors and smart tags. It can be across the industry, may it be industrial, retail, F&B, office, or whatever it is. But if I want to quote an example, right, again, a typical example, Singapore, there are a lot of office buildings here. It's a typical building, people still using the 50-year-old technology of VAV system. Again, with the LED lights, that's the latest technology. People still think that's the latest technology. And the lux sensors, that's a typical building still being built now for a multi-tenanted office. And the VAV is being zoned to 80 square meters. And of course, does it work, right? Yes, it still works, but is it the next generation building? No, it's not the next generation building. So what can we do better and how technology can play there, right? If we can just install the smart IoT sensors, then if we can have the people flow sensors inside there, and if we can just correlate that with the indoor temperature, outdoor temperature, and then the lux and the air quality, and if we combine it with the micro zoning, why can't we have a personalized cooling, right? But not per person, but maybe a small cluster of cooling. So it enhances the thermal comfort. Then people would love to go into the office, right? Instead of 80 square meters, can it be 20 square meters? And can we install a 3D sun tracking roller blinds? And can we have a dimmable lights? And all of this is not powered by electricity. Can we power it up with Ethernet, right? And if you do all of this, the topmost layer on top of it is a the manager, or maybe the controller who controls it, right? If we can integrate all of those things into one deep learning analytics platform and monitor and control dynamically, we can see substantial energy savings, space utilization, and human comfort, right? And that's a substantial benefit for the building and the industry. And that's one aspect. And maybe if I look at it, the future opportunity, right? So it's a current problem and an opportunity for the startups, right? Is among many other concerns that we have in terms of sustainability, right? The upcoming big concern for all the buildings and even the electricity grid is an electrical infrastructure upgrade required to meet the EV vehicle wave that's coming up. So I do believe that technology can play a huge role in minimizing the infra upgrade required for the EV, right? So we have seen use cases and we are trying to do, right? So I wouldn't say like we have people have failed in there. I have not seen appropriate technology. And if I can see an appropriate technology, I'll be the first one to adopt this, right? And we do have some ideas. We have been working with others, right? What we can do is like, what we can do to minimize the infrastructure upgrade, right? It's all about measuring, balancing the loads, and minimizing the peak demands and the non-peak demands, understanding the peak and non-peak demands, and balancing it and making it permanent load can be balanced off permanently, and then making a dynamic load balancing. And all of this comes with the technology. Without technology, we can't do this, right? And I believe that's where the big opportunity on technology is. I can add in a bit more, but you told us it's only 5 minutes left out, so I'm going to stop here.
Thanks, Venky. And I think you gave some great hints to any entrepreneurs or startups in that might be in the audience today of exactly what Lendlease might be looking for in terms of partners. So I think that's fantastic. Hui Mien, I wanted to follow up actually on in the same kind of theme, but following with all that information that you shared about Singtel's science-based targets. You're one of the first in the world to endorse the Task Force for Climate-Related Disclosures. You have an internal carbon price. I mean, you're very advanced in your thinking and measurement around this. What would you? How would you advise corporates or maybe even smaller companies to start this journey and have real impact along the way? How would you advise people to get started?
Well, I guess the most important thing is is to change your mindset and just get started. Like what I would, of course, as with many things, right? I think when Singtel first started, it's really daunting. We're still in the process of a portion of organization trying to educate people on what Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. But today, at least I think we can use the language, right? When we tell people this is our Scope 2 and this will help us to reduce our Scope 1 and Scope 3, people actually understand. So I definitely think in order to get started, the first thing is to start small. Nothing beats it like a good example, right? Start small. Look around, look for a good example. Companies start small. Nobody needs to be net zero tomorrow. So step by step, and then you build on it, because sustainability itself is a marathon, it's a journey. It's never a sprint. Hence, that's definitely something that I would want to say. But there's also another thing I probably want to add on, and it's probably related to the hackathon as well. I think typically we like to look for big, sexy items. A lot of things do come from putting in many little simple yet powerful solutions to actually aggregate and find a big and you get a good result, right? Because if I have 2 initiatives that brings me 5% each versus if I have 10 initiatives that brings me 2% each. I think it's really looking at never underestimate the small little act that we are all going to do. So maybe just to add on to Venky's point, I think one of the things which I often believe is that's the 70-20 rule, right? 70 will probably based on technology, because that's really where you see your big savings, your more efficient chiller, your update. The second portion, which is probably more about operations. And that's where what Venky talked about come in really helpful, right? And the same for Singtel. I mean, for our network. So for our new 5G network, we've actually activated Sleep Cell. We are able to then monitor traffic for those cells that do not have traffic at some point of the time. We are able to activate the Sleep Cell mode so that we don't consume as much energy and etc. So those are the things that once you have that analytics, when you have the intelligence to sort of manage, that would definitely be something that is helpful. Yeah. So 20% of operations, or even just adjusting to how we operate, staggering some of the times of operations and etc. Especially now we work from home. I think office pattern has changed. So it's no longer you have a fixed pattern, people go in 8:30 and leave at 5:30 or 6 o'clock, right? So that it's definitely very helpful. And finally, I think the third point, the 10%, even though it's really the masses, right? How can everyone develop their habit? Sometimes the habit, people don't deliberately leave the lights on. People just don't remember, right? But has there been any, little nudges through technological means to just somehow remind people? You know how we have like apps to say that, oh, you count your calorie and you eat, and research has shown that it's actually work, right? So what are some of the areas in this way where it's easy enough for people to use, and it collectively will sort of bring in a good enough reduction? I think that would probably be what I would suggest.
And then maybe Steve, just maybe the final question to you on how can startups work better with corporates, and kind of unlock the benefits for each other.
Yeah, I think on paper at least, corporates and startups working together, is the ideal marriage, because startups need customers. If they get customers, then they get more revenue, which means they can get more talent, which means they can get investment, etc. So customers are number one thing, and of course corporates bring them big customers and give them the credibility that they need. And large corporates need to innovate faster, and of course, and startups can bring that. But I guess in reality, as we know, it's not that easy, given the fact that that startups thrive on risk and corporates want to minimize risk, and so how do you manage that tension? So I think if you speak to most startups, they'll probably be frustrated with slow and bureaucratic process. But I think my experience, what startups need to do at least, is really, particularly the ones we work with, Maria, you and I work with some of these guys, and they are hugely passionate about sustainability and what they're trying to do and the cause they're trying to work on. And the challenge is today, virtually nobody is buying sustainability. No one, they might be talking about it, not really acting on sustainability. What they will act on is if you bring them extra revenue or reduce their costs and improve their margins. And so translating the passion around sustainability into business benefits. We're here to reduce your cost by 10%. We're here to be able to deliver your project 3 months faster. We're here to give you productivity improvements or increase revenue or increase yield. So translating the narrative into business benefits, I think is probably the key things. I think on the other side, I think, for corporates, I think quite often what happens is there's maybe not necessarily the buy-in or the clarity about why things are happening and what necessarily the problem statements are at the top. So that top level buy-in straight down what the key objectives are. And then what typically then happens is there might be a hackathon, or there might be a challenge, or there might be a pitch for startups, but there isn't the connection between the top strategy and also what that means on the ground. And what that then may mean is that a startup will be brought in to do a trial, and that trial doesn't really go anywhere, or it's just a one-off trial, and startups just don't have the resources to do that. So I think there's a little bit of empathy and recognition on both sides to try and understand where both sides are coming from to make a successful outcome. I think it's not easy, but I think if you get it right, then it's hugely powerful for both parties.
Great, yeah, and so that's a great segue. So we've got about six questions that have come in from the audience. I don't think we'll have a chance to answer all of them, but I wanted to ask Alvin's question first, because I think it links very well what Hui Mien was sharing about the approach to coming up with a strategy and acting first, and kind of Steve, what you were saying about making the results very tangible. So maybe to all of the panelists, Alvin's question is that sustainability will take decades. It's very far away. So how do we unlock the benefits of sustainability today in order to kind of build that momentum so that we can continue to move forward?
I actually think that sustainability is not far away. There's actually a climate urgency that we're looking at. I mean, it really depends on who you sort of subscribe to and what you looked at. If we look at the worst scenario that even the IPCC painted, if we don't do anything or we don't change the way that we do an expedite, I think we're actually heading to 2.8 to 4 degrees by 2000, right? So it's I don't think it's anything that's distant. It's actually probably something that needs to happen maybe yesterday. So in that sense, I guess the real thing is first of all, to my point, right? We have to accept that sustainability is here to stay. And then the second thing is, regardless of how big or how small, we need to just introspect a little bit and look at what should we do differently, or what can we do differently in order to bring about the benefit of sustainability. There are no lack of plenty example out there in terms of how sustainability can bring you benefits to your business, right? I think Steve has just shared quite a few of them. It's really being able to take the first step out, start looking at what can be done differently in order to say that, okay, let me prioritize on that. And again, I think coming back to the point that you've mentioned about, first is you need to understand your carbon emission profile. Of course, actually, when we're only talking about energy and decarbonization at this point in time, subsequently, once we get that through, we still need to talk about a loss of biodiversity, nature. We still need to talk about waste and water, which in a way today has been slightly overshadowed by carbon and energy, right? But I think that's fine, because if we can crack the energy and the carbon piece, we've actually got probably more than half of the work done, and then we can actually focus on the rest of the thing. So really, it's looking at take the first step, find something to do. You can start with one initiative, two initiative, doesn't matter. The whole idea is to get committed to this journey and then translating that into action. No action is too small.
Thank you, Steve. Anything else to add to Hui Mien's answer there?
No, I just reinforce what's just been said. I think it's not a nice to have, it's how he said earlier on, right? It's absolutely critical. Companies don't have a choice, because the only companies that will survive in the future will be sustainable companies. If you want to be able to operate a profitable company in the future with regulations, with carbon tax, with carbon price, you want to trade across borders with Europe or with the US. You want to keep your customers, you want to attract talent, you want to get low cost of capital. To do all of that in the future, you need to be a sustainable company. And if you're not doing that, then you'll die. So I don't think you really have a choice. It's just about, starting and acting quickly. And as we've seen, what we've done with Wavemaker, but also what we've done with Propertyguru, and what we talk about with all of our portfolio companies is baby steps. But put one foot forward and start moving forward. Otherwise, you're just going to get run over later on.
So I've asked Anne and the team for 5 more minutes, so I can ask at least one more question. So the one that I'd like to ask is around data centers, because I think that's very relevant to the Singapore context, and I'm sure that's something which Hui Mien and Venky, you might have some interesting thoughts on. So I mean, data centers, are critical to our infrastructure, right? Our telco infrastructure and our internet infrastructure, but they use an incredible amount of energy. And as we rely on this infrastructure more and more, that's just going to increase our energy demand. So what would you say we can do about this? Is there anything that we can do to help make data centers more efficient? And kind of make this type of explosion in technology more sustainable?
Yeah, of course. I think, in order to do that, we have to build more efficient data center. Today, I think, I guess we looked at, we've got to continuously bring down the PUE, so that we know that at least to begin with, data center, it's in a way a need, right? A need that every one of us we need to have in order to facilitate business, to facilitate even in order to make sure that we always have connectivity. So the first thing is to look at, we typically look from the demand and the consumption perspective, demand and also supply side, right? So if you actually look at the demand side, really it's how do we to begin with, build an efficient data center as much as we can. Continuously bring down the PUE. Maybe I think average 1.4, 1.5, and then we need to bring it down to 1.3 and 1.2. And how we do that is, of course, if you actually look at the energy consumption, a lot of them is given to cooling, especially in tropical countries like Singapore or Southeast Asia per se. So really, there has been a lot of technology and investment into cooling technology for data center. So instead of really cooling at the hall level, now it's really moving down to on-chip cooling, immersion, liquid cooling. So there is a lot of I think exciting technology and movement and investment into that space in order to bring down that. So once we moderate demand per se, there's two other things we can do from an infrastructure build perspective. One other things we can do is actually educate customer. I think one of the things, especially at Singtel, when we are a co-location company, it's to educate our customer in terms of the practices. Coming back to, I talk about technology at 70%, the 20% is how do they operate and run their data centers. Like we should partner with them and also encourage and influence them to say that sometimes this is how you can actually look at. This is how you can actually look at managing your operation so that you're also reducing energy usage. And the last part is, of course, looking at supply. I think being able to power data center with renewable energy then remain one of the top priorities for any data center operators or any. So you could see that all the hyperscalers, and you've read about all the big news, right? Where Google talk about they're going carbon free 24/7 matching electricity. Amazon this week just announced that they're the world largest buyer of renewable energy today, and they just announced like big projects in Poland and India. So I think these are the three big buckets that we all have to continue look at, because sustainability is not all about not consuming, but really sustainability is all about what's the balance, what's the optimization. Are we operating at a level where we don't have wastage? It's really about doing more with less, doing more business with less resources, creating more value with less resources. I think that's where we should be heading. Thanks.
Well, I'm going to leave it on that note, just in the interest of time. There are 4 other questions, so I hope the NCS Events team will kindly share those with the panelists and maybe give the panelists an opportunity to respond, especially to the direct ones offline. So I think the final word is just to say thank you to Venky, Steve, and to Hui Mien for joining me on this very interesting discussion. And with that, I'd like to hand over back to Clarice for the next part.
Thank you, Marie. Thanks to Hui Mien, Venky, Steve as well for the insightful sharing. Now for a recap of our challenge, which was launched on September 9th with submission closing on October 28th. Participants can choose from 2 categories to enter. There's the entrepreneur track, which is open to all the full-time staff of NCS Group and affiliate companies. The entrepreneur track is open to the startup community around APAC. And leading up to the submissions, we have a series of talks and webinars specially curated for you. Today's session that you saw was on the topic of sustainability. And next Friday, the panel will be discussing metaverse for business. The session will feature speakers from Meta, UOB, Keppel Land, Clayton, and Hatton Land. So scan the QR code now to register if you're interested to hear the experts' view on how metaverse is going to change our daily lives and how businesses can tap on this megatrend to better serve their clients or find new markets. So once again, on behalf of the Next Hack Organizing Committee, thank you for spending time with us. And we hope that today's session served to inspire you on possible innovative solutions on the challenge topic of sustainability. So if you have any questions related to the challenge, please feel free to contact Anne, Deepak, or myself. Thank you.